This is Rob Van Hoff with Torah Resource and Heart of Messiah, and I am going to do a quick lesson for this week's Torah portion, which is Tazria and Metzora. It's Leviticus chapters 12 through 15. And what you see on the screen here is a fragment from the Dead Sea Scrolls, and you can see that's in Paleo Hebrew, and this is the end of Leviticus 14 and the beginning of Leviticus 15. So that's what we're seeing here. And what I'm going to do is just pick out a couple of the phrases here to notice how the letters are formed. And then what I have here is an image. It's a little harder to see, but I'll fill it in. You can see the Paleo Hebrew writing here. This is from what's called the Siloam inscription. The Siloam inscription, which dates inscription, I can spell, which dates to 8th century. That's BC. That's the time of Hezekiah. It's from Hezekiah's tunnel. And so the letters here, what we do is we'll pull out some of these and we'll compare with what we find in this fragment, which is 11Q1 from Qumran, and it's roughly dated to 100 BC. So we're going to be able to look at Hebrew from 8th century, which is the 700s, to the 100s. So there's going to be basically a 600 years between the fragment on top and the inscription below. And we'll be looking at that, and I think that will be fun. So let's zero in here, first and foremost, on our passage from the end of Leviticus 14 here. I'll erase that. I want to go back to that yellow marker. I liked that. And right from the top here, and I'm just going to copy what we see here. We see a mem, and I'm going to kind of copy it. Mem, a chet, a vav, and a tzadi. And the reason I like the tzadi is because it's a rarer letter. It's rarer for us to see the tzadi. But here we go. We can have a look at this. Then, as we continue, we see a dot, a dash, or this little dot or dash that divides words, and then we see a lamed, whoop, like that, an ayin, and then what we have here is a yod, and it's a little hard to see, but trust me, it's there. It looks like that. It kind of goes like that, and then a resh. And what this says in Hebrew, if we write it in our block script, it's mem, chet, vav, and then a tzadi. That one vav's too long, in my opinion. Mechutz, lamed, ayin, yod, resh. Mechutz la'ir. Mechutz la'ir, which means outside the city. Now, this is just a tiny little bit of a fragment to see here. We would put a hirik and a u sound here, and then there'd be a kamatz, and then a hirik under the ayin. Mechutz la'ir. And this is that phrase from Leviticus 14:53 that says he will let the live bird go free. V'shilach et hatzipor hachaya el. And that's what we don't see here. But then we see mechutz la'ir, outside the city. And then it continues and says el pnei hasadeh, into the open field. But this mechutz ha'ir, this phrase right here, is clearly legible and is helpful in determining what we're looking at here. And then we can see the letters directly below those. And we see another tzadi. So let's continue on here. I'm going to make the point a little smaller. We see a tzadi. Of course, I'm filling in some of it that's broken here. A resh. Now their reshes are points a little more like that. Then an ayin. And then this is a tav. And this is from the word tzara'at. Tzara'at. That's the word for what we translate as leprosy usually. Tzadi, resh, ayin, tav, tzara'at. Then we see there's a little dot, a little word divider, another vav, something like that. I don't know the exact stroke for the vav. I think it's a squiggle, and then he puts a line, a lamed, nice long lamed. Then we have a nun, down and up, tav, and then a kuf. Now, I think it looks kind of like that. I wonder if the pen slipped, if there should have been more of a loop, but we don't know. But we do know it's a kuf. And then we see another word divider. Then we see a vav, and then nothing. So this is tzara'at. This is the end of verse 54. And the words I'll write down here is vav, lamed, nun, tav, kuf. And a netek, ulenatek is the word. Netek is, this word here is the word for scale. And then we have the word divider, then a vav, but then nothing after the vav. And what that shows us is that if we would have been able to see the whole scroll, we would have looked down to the right, we would have gone down to the right to the next line, and it would have continued with the next word. This is, in other words, part of the next word, but it's broken. And that's pretty cool to see. So letters we have then here are pretty cool. They're very legible, obviously. And there is one we'll look at the last line here. Let me go back to her. We've got a vav. Oops. I like to make the vav like this. Like that. Vav. Bet. Yod. It's a nice big yod. Another vav. And then a mem. Then a dot. Then a hey. And I'm glad we're looking at I'm glad we see the hey, because the hey is kind of like we looked before. And this is a tet, and then another hey, which is kind of hard to see, and then nothing. Nothing. But in Hebrew, we know what this is when we look at the book of Leviticus. It's uvyom, and in the day, hey, tet, hey, resh. There should be a resh there. Hatahor, bayom hatahor, in the day of cleanness. But we notice we should have a letter R here, or a row, or a resh, but we don't have it. And what that shows us is that just like in this line, we had the start of a word, but it didn't finish. So too here, we have a word that didn't finish. And to do that, to see what the whole word is, we'd have to scroll down and see the next line. So in other words, the scribe wanted a nice, clean left justification, even if that meant not completing a whole word. I think that's pretty cool. If we were to just see what this beginning of Leviticus 15:1 is, we see in Aleph Lamed here, which is the end of the word Israel. So it's not going to be very visible because I'm in yellow. This is the end of the word Israel. And then we have a Vav, another Aleph, Mem, and then there's a resh that we can't see, but we know is there because we can compare with other texts. And then that little dash there, that's just a word divider. And then we have another aleph, lamed, another hey, and then a mem, or mem. Now remember, no mem sophites here. I'm going to do that again. There's our hey. No final forms at this point. Remember, in our what we call Old Hebrew or Paleo Hebrew, there are no final forms. And so what this is, now I'll write below, is to Israel, ve'amartem, and you will say to them, Alehem. So that's what I just transcribed from above. Ve'amartem, and you will say to them. So this is the beginning of Leviticus 15. Now, some of the letters I want to leave here. Again, this is the end of Leviticus 14, beginning of Leviticus 15. No major discrepancies, at least from what we see here, from what's in the Masoretic text. Now, again, this is what we call, this is 11Q1 from 100 BC. And we're going to go back in time. So this is 100 BC, right, that we're at. We're going to go back another 600 years to the 8th century, to the inscription from what's this called, the Siloam inscription. It's the inscription that was inside of Hezekiah's tunnel in the Old City. If you ever visit Jerusalem, if you haven't, you can go down to the City of David and you can go through Hezekiah's tunnel. And there's just a few phrases here. Now this is, it's not super easy to read, and there's been a lot of work done on this inscription. But a couple phrases I wanted to pull out that you could see is based on, let's see here, see if I got to find it myself. Because it's pretty faint. Okay, here we go. Sorry for the bumping around. And what I'll do is I'm going to write it first over the top. So that's an aleph. And then we have a sheen. And then a word divider. A lamed. A kuf. A resh. And then a tav. Then another word divider. And then we have another resh. An ayin. Let me make a better ayin than that. And then a vav. Now notice the style. I'll continue, and this is what this says here is, now there's no vowel points, but it's a man towards his companion. So this is aleph shin. Now that's what we would call defective spelling, because normally in full spelling we'd say aleph yod shin like that. But this is just ish, likrat, towards or to meet, and we have these little dots in between, and then resh, ayin, vav, re'av, or re'u, or something like that, his neighbor. A man towards his neighbor is literally what it is. And if you can just go to Wikipedia and look up the Siloam inscription, or look up Hezekiah's tunnel inscription, and you can read the whole translation and you can see pictures of it there. So this is all accessible to you. I'm just picking out places where we can find letters that we can contrast from 8th century. So this is the time of Hezekiah all the way to the year 100 BC. Another passage that I really like is now sadly the picture I have is a little bit cut off, but you see here's a mem, and then a nun. Then we have a divider, hey, another mem, a vav, and then we have this tzadi, which is this really nice letter. And then we have an aleph. And a divider. Then we have another aleph. And it's hard to tell whether it's like that or whether it's like that. I think it really is this. I think it's a separate stroke for the aleph. Then we have a lamed going all the way up like that. Another divider. And we'll back out, and I will do the bigger picture Hebrew stuff. Here we have a cool letter combination. We have bet, resh. We have a bet, which goes like this with a sharp angle, and the resh, which crosses over it. Isn't that cool? And then we have a kaf, and it's hard to know. Some kafs have an extra little guy in there, and a hey. So there it is. And what this is from min dot hamotza hey mem vav tzadi aleph, which is the word for spring. And then we have aleph lamed 2, and then we have the word habrecha, the pool, ha h hey bet resh kaf hey, habracha. So one of the things it's really beautiful Hebrew script, the Hezekiah tunnel. If you look at the many letters that have long, I'll use my eraser because I can just do this kind of, oops, oh, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to point. Maybe I could do it below without erasing. Probably not. I can change colors here. Notice the tall letters. Like, for example, I'm just going to write out in the blue here. The mem, oh, okay, I'll go back to blue. That blue had a nice contrast. I'm just going to use this. Actually, I can write down below, can't I? Do that. The mems are very nice and big like that. And the vavs go way long like that. The alephs are like this. But then you have the lamed start here and go up. The kaf goes down like that. Isn't that nice? And then, but the shin is tight and closed in like that. And the hay also is pretty shallow. The bet is pretty shallow. But then you get to the resh and it goes way down. And the nun is the same way, goes way down and up. So you can see how these, so this is 8th century BC Hebrew writing. Very beautiful. I'm doing my best to replicate it, but do you see there's a definite scribal style? The script has a very specialized, we know this was a very talented scribe. Now again, this is chiseled into the stone. And look how, like this letter here, look how long that tzadi is. It's really nice. He's not in any hurry to try to, he's not in a hurry to finish, and he's not trying to cram too much in a tight space. He's using all the space, dividing out very, very nicely. And so let's now take a couple of those letters that we identified from the 8th century BC from the Hezekiah's tunnel, Siloam inscription, and compare with what we see in 100 BC. Well, the first letter we can look at is an aleph. Where's a good aleph here? So we're going to go back here. Here's a decent aleph right here. So notice it's kind of like that. Actually, that's probably, I could do better. It's even more shallow. It's more horizontal. The aleph is much more horizontal. Let me go through and I'll just circle alephs. So there's this one. Here's another one right there. I'm sure there's others in my eyes, just not picking it up right now. But we can see, oh, here, right here. So it's like that. It's almost like an F, but it's got that extra long top. So let's contrast that then with what we see from the Siloam inscription. So if I just make a little chart, I'll just say SI is for Siloam inscription, and 11Q1, which is the name of the Leviticus manuscript. So the aleph for 11Q1, as we've seen, looks something like that. But what is the aleph for the Hezekiah's tunnel? It's this one. Every time, here, here, here. I mean, this guy had a style. He knew what he was doing. So let's go up and contrast that. Real long vertical line, and then something like that. So quite a difference. How about the letter bet? Do we have a letter bet? Here's, we might not have looked at this word, but here's a letter bet right there. So it's kind of like an iron, and then it goes down and has an arm with its elbow. Oops. Well, that one is going to be probably a lot closer when we go down. Sorry, I know this is a little disifying, but right here is a bet. That looks pretty close, doesn't it? Now it has a little bit of it, maybe more of an angle like that, and I think it's a little bit longer. Maybe not that much longer, but it's longer. Now, the next one I want to look at, and maybe I'll just do a couple more, is the hay. Here's a hay, here's a hay. Remember we saw this last week too. It's like real quick kind of hay. So our 11Q1 for a hay has something like this, and then a quick line above it, which of course is a shorthand for, you still have the 3 lines. But notice the hay in the Siloam inscription, which is right here, right here, right here. So it just looks like a flag, right? Just like that. So we can definitely see a cursification, like it's becoming we're going from this formal, chiseled script that is for public display, and so it probably has extra funding, and you get the best guy to do it. And that's our Siloam inscription. Versus this particular manuscript might not have been a master scribe. He might have been a scribe in training, and he's using ink on leather. So obviously there's a different medium, and he's probably, under a little bit of a time crunch to finish this huge scroll. So there could be factors that impact the quality of the work. Another one let's look at is the tzadi. So notice the tzadi here. This is 100 BC, right? It's kind of a short little guy, like that. But look at the tzadi here, real long. Well, I kind of exaggerated it there, but you get the point. I mean, look at the comparative length of that letter to its surrounding letters. And so our scribe really, I think, made it much longer. But you can tell it's the same letter. So you could do this, and scholars of Hebrew, maybe we could do a lamed. Let's do a lamed. Here's kol right here. We didn't look at this verse, but here's a kaf lamed, which is the word all, kol. When we look at, so our lamed here is just kind of like that. Oops, not really. It's kind of got this sharp end on it. It's like, but notice the lameds in the Salome inscription are like it literally looks like a shepherd's crook, doesn't it? It's got that nice loop at the end, and it's much more like that. Maybe even more of a little hook on the end. So this is really cool, because what you see is how Hebrew writing there's a continuity of characters. In other words, you can recognize that these are both alepphs, both bets, both hays, both tzadis, both lameds, but we're in a different time. So there's definitely a heritage of the aleph bet being preserved across this time. One of the biggest differences I see here, and just the ones we've looked at, are between the alephs and the hays. You really see a difference. But when it comes to letters that come down, just to wrap up here, we see with the mems, we see the same thing. We see the mems come down nicely, the kafs come down nicely, both in the Salome inscription and in this Paleo-Hebrew from 100 BC. So there you have it. This went a little longer than I had planned. Hi, Stan. Hi, Salvatore. Hi, Teresa. Nice to see you guys. I hope this is fun and informative, give you a little bit of history. It's important to have that chronology in our mind when we think about not only the transmission of the scriptures, but the different scripts that the scribal tradition had at its disposal to capture God's word in writing. Now, of course, Hezekiah's tunnel, this is not scripture. It's in the book of the Bible. You can read about Hezekiah's tunnel, but this account, again, you can read it in translation if you go just look it up on Wikipedia, the Salome inscription or Hezekiah's tunnel inscription. It just describes how you had men on two different ends chiseling away, cutting away in the rock towards each other, and then they met in the middle and water ran through. So it's not scripture, but it represents from the tribe, from the kingdom of Judah, I should say, the kingdom of Yehudah, in the time of Hezekiah. So this is before the Babylonians came and destroyed the temple. So the temple, Solomon's temple, was still standing when this Salome inscription was created. So it's a special glimpse of Jewish style or Judean style Hebrew script from the late First Temple era. And then, of course, the 11Q1 comes from about the year 100. So it's still under the Hasmonean dynasty in the Second Temple period. So I thought that would be fun and informative to compare and contrast those. And I hope you all are doing well and have a blessed afternoon. And we plan to have another Shabbat stream coming up on this Saturday on Shabbat, starting at 10:30 not Eastern time, Pacific time. So.